Hey everyone, welcome to yet another episode of wari-Q, and today's question is how to deal with office politics. It's such a frequently asked question where people are struggling to deal with office politics. They feel like they're being pressurized, they're being consumed by all the politics that's happening in the office. It's toxic, it's creating stress in their life, it's creating pressure, it's creating this anxiety, and they don't know how to deal with it. And here is how I think one could deal with that. Here is how I think one could create a posture that fights with this office politics. But let me go back to explain this to my first job. And I distinctly remember in the first few months of my first job, I had this senior, he's not my manager, but just someone who was senior in the company, who I didn't like too much. And here's why I didn't like him too much. I didn't like him too much because whenever we had to go to our boss, who was just one person, same boss for the two of us, he would never take me along. He would somehow ask me to stay back. He would always be the one speaking to our boss. I spoke to our boss, but it wasn't ever for like work. He would check on me. Hey, are you doing okay? Things are fine, da, da, da. So it was like this nice, happy talk, but it wasn't ever for something meaningful. Like I got to present my work or got to discuss ideas and everything. And I was convinced that this senior of mine didn't want me to take away his shine. He didn't want me to take away any of the credit. He didn't want me to have any impact on what his boss thought of him, which was, by the way, great things. I just felt that he was jealous of me, that he was trying to undercut me, that he was trying to never make me get that visibility or that FaceTime with my boss to prove how good I am. And for a really long time, I held this grudge. I held this grudge where I didn't like him because I just felt that he was coming in my way of showing how awesome I am to my boss. And I remember one day, I finally got the courage to ask him that, if you don't mind, I would like to share the fact that whenever you go and meet our boss without me, I feel like you're doing so because you don't want me to get any FaceTime with him. And you think that I will just take away a part of the credit that today comes entirely to you. And he listened to me. To his credit, he was very patient. To his credit, he didn't come across as judging, didn't come across as cynical. And he then very openly shared something that I had no idea about. And he said, the reason I'm doing this is because I don't want you to face the wrath of our boss when you're so young in the company. Our boss has a temper, and he tends to lose it very easily and very often. And it's quite likely that the work you and I have done that we want to present to him will not make him happy, or he may have things to say which he will not say in the right manner that he should. And I don't want you to feel, because of how he says it, that you haven't done a good job. I've been in this company for a really long time. I understand him. I understand where he comes from and why he speaks the way he does. But the fact is, anyone who's young, anyone who's as young as you, can very easily take it otherwise. Can very easily assume that this boss hates you. And that would just crush your self-confidence. It would just crush everything that you stand for. And I want you to first focus on the work, get really good with it, get very confident with it. And at some point of time when you've done it for so long and you've really gotten good at it, is when I would love to take you in front of him, because then you will be in some way ready to face whatever comes your way, in whatever manner he says it. And that day I realized such an important lesson. I realized such an important lesson that we misunderstand people because of our misconceptions and our biases and our perceptions of who they are and why are they behaving the way they do. So my first thing, and this is not to bring you down or to suggest that what you're going through is somehow your misunderstanding, but the first thing that is immensely helpful in dealing with office politics is whenever you face someone who is not aligned with you, who's creating this disturbance, who's creating this nuisance, who's creating this toxicity in your world, step back and ask yourself this question: why are they doing that? What could be the reason that they're doing that? And don't make it about you. Don't make it about you. Make it about them. What is it that they know that you don't? What is it that is possibly driving them that has nothing to do with you? What is it that's their personal agenda, their personal goal, their personal ambition that you know nothing about, that you may not be privy to, that you don't have any role to play in as well? And create those options, those possibilities in your head. And then, whenever you go through this, for the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or whatever time, just test those possibilities. See if they're somehow fitting in. If you find someone who's always shouting, who's always scolding people, who's always talking down upon people, who's always micromanaging, who's always making sure that there is something that's happening, that they get to the boss cleaner than you, faster than you, in a better way than you, they're doing things that you don't think are cool, they are not ethical, just stop and ask yourself, why could they be doing this? What is it that they can get from this which has nothing to do with you? I guarantee you, if you were to go down this path, 30 to 40% of the problems that you actually face will vanish. Because you perhaps will realize that the large part of the stories that you were telling ourselves were just revolving around you and had you in the center of the problem. When the fact is that you were never part of the problem. You had nothing to do with the problem. The person behaving opposite to you in a manner that you didn't like had nothing to do with you. It could have been anyone in front of you. It's not personal. It's something that drives them for a reason that they hold within themselves and has nothing to do with you. But once you go through this journey, and the fact that you now understand it a lot better than the fact that you are just feeling betrayed, feeling victimized, feeling targeted, is liberating. Is when you know that this is nothing to do with you, it's nothing personal, it's nothing that you have done to bring that upon yourself. It's the person opposite who are the way they are. And that is a very, very liberating feeling. A very, very powerful realization. And if it happens, then that drives away a large part of the toxicity. Then you come to the second thing, which is what I call systematic versus individual-led office politics. What I mean by that? Whenever you're faced or in the middle of what you call office politics, when you're in the middle of things that you don't like, that you're not comfortable with, ask yourself this: does the leader, the topmost leader in the organization, also behave the same way or not? Will they be happy if they got to know what's going on? Will they be sad if they got to know what's going on? Or will they be indifferent when they get to know what's going on? And here's why it's important. It's important because I firmly believe that the culture of the organization, the values, the way things happen is almost always driven from the top. It's the top that is being reflected down to the lowest possible level. Everything that the leader of the house, the leader of the company is doing is in some way manifested in the actions, the values, and the systems and the processes that the company goes through. So if you find that what you are feeling, what you're experiencing, what you're going through is in direct conflict with how the leader behaves, believes, or even echoes his or her sentiment, it's likely that the politics you face is an individual-driven political system. It's not a systematic political system, it's an individual-driven political system. It's the fault or the specific person who's causing that is at fault. It's not the system at fault. And if that's the realization, then you ought to have the moral courage to report this. You ought to have the moral courage to stand for what is right, to stand for the principles by which the company abides itself and lives by, and report whatever action is going on. Whether it's misconduct, which is sexual or physical in nature, whether it's mental harassment, whether it's politics to the point where it's becoming unethical, it's becoming almost illegal, it's becoming something that is extremely stressful, toxic, and you don't find the leader behaving in that way, endorsing it, or even in some way being indifferent to it, but instead being extremely sad and depressed when they get to know of it, it is your moral responsibility to report it. Because you know that if it's reported, it's not going to cause a rift where you will become the problem and the victim and will be victimized for it. There will be a positive effect coming out of it. But if you find that the leader in some way is indifferent, is unfortunately even happy when he sees this action, then you know that that's the wrong place to be. You know that's the wrong place to be. Because at the end of it, there's nothing that you can do to change the system. The system is systematically driven by the top, and it is ingrained in how the company, the organization functions. You cannot do anything to fight that office politics. There is nothing that you can do which is mentally and emotionally going to be such a cure and such a strong stand to take that you will be able to withstand it. At some point of time, you will crumble. At some point of time, you will be crushed. At some point of time, you will find that you are not able to withstand this. And you don't want to get to that point where you don't even have the energy to get up because someone has pushed you so hard. You want to be able to walk away when you still have all your self-respect left, when you still have massive energy left where it should be diverted towards the right thing and not in fighting a system that perhaps can never fix itself. Which brings me to the third point. How do you even know that something like this is in direct conflict with what you stand for and how you do it? And a simple test for that is just ask yourself whether this is aligned to the values you live by. At the end of it, I have a core belief that it's our value system, it's our worldview that drives our peace and our inner calm. If we find ourselves in conflict with values, then we are never at peace. It could be at home, it could be in relationships, it definitely can be at work. If you find yourself struggling with trying to find a match between the values of the opposite side and yourself, then it's certain that it is not going to work in the long run. It is absolutely certain it is not going to work in the long run. And at that point of time, you don't want to be left feeling like a fool where you knew all along it's never going to work out, and yet you lived in that false hope that somehow you can fight it. It's like those relationships you are in where you always knew it's never going to work out because there was a value conflict, and yet you never saw the reality of it and you thought that the person will change, the person will change, the person will change. But ultimately it led to disaster. And you know it's going to happen here as well at workplace. If you find that your values are in conflict with the company's, or the company's values are in conflict with yours, you're never, ever going to escape the politics. You're never, ever going to be a point where you can be indifferent to the politics because it will hurt you at the point where it hurts the most. It will be something that pinches you in a way that nothing else does. And there's nothing that you can do about it. The last thing which helps when you're dealing with office politics is don't ever, ever, ever vent out your frustration to your colleagues. Don't ever bitch about what's going on to your colleagues. Don't become part of the problem that you're trying to fight. If you do the exact same thing that you don't like coming from others, you're part of the problem. You're part of the problem that someone else is feeling with you, from you, and you don't even recognize it. If you indulge in rumors, if you indulge in gossip, if you indulge in backlashing, if you indulge in bad-mouthing someone behind their backs, if you indulge in just venting your frustrations, no matter how legit those frustrations are, you're part of the problem. Because someone else is doing exactly the same thing and you don't see it that way, because in your head, you know yourself through your thoughts, but you value and measure others through their actions. And because you know your thoughts and you know that you're coming in from a pure point of view, you think that you're cool doing the exact same thing. But if someone else were to do it, you find that that's not good. That's not something that should be done. You call that politics. You call that what you don't want to be. Don't do that. If you stand isolated, just as a witness to everything that's going on, you go through the mental hard work of asking this question, why could they be doing what they're doing? Which has nothing to do with me, everything to do with them. And you ask yourself, is the leader of the organization going to endorse this, be indifferent to it, or be sad or depressed about it? And then you will find a path to how you can deal with that. If you're able to get to a point where you are rationalizing why the person opposite to you is doing what you're doing, you will feel pity and sympathy for them instead of anger and frustration. If you get to a point where you realize that the leader does not support what this is and you have the moral courage to report that, you will have fixed a problem. And if you recognize that the leader is absolutely aligned to what's happening, then you will know that you're at the wrong place. And if you find your values conflicting with what the organization values are, it's never going to work out. And if you find that your values are aligned to what the company also behaves in, endorses, operates with, then sooner than later you will find that whatever is the politics is almost in your head. If you are able to very objectively understand where it's coming from, you will recognize that either it's a person problem that could be fixed, or it was a perception problem that you need to fix within yourself. I hope this helps. If there are any other instances where you have encountered office politics that you haven't been able to maneuver around, find a solution to, share that in the comment section below. I will be more than happy to at least give my 2 cents on it, or get someone else to answer it who is a better qualified individual to do so. Until next week, I will see you all on wari-Q. Have a wonderful week. Bye. Please don't forget to subscribe to this channel so that whenever we put up a new video, you're aware of it.